The old pickup truck rattled to a stop at the edge of the foreclosure notice. James Harrington stared at the red stamp across his mortgage statement, his calloused hands trembling. He had 30 days left on the farm that had been in his family for 5 generations. Just as he crumpled the paper in despair, he spotted a figure stumbling from the tree line, collapsing into his southeastern field. He didn't know it yet, but the woman in the torn hiking gear was Alexandra Blackwood, heiress to a $75 billion tech fortune, who had just escaped her father's security team and the arranged marriage that would merge 2 corporate dynasties. As James carried her unconscious form back to his farmhouse, neither realized their chance encounter would not only save his land, but completely transform both their lives. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Now, let's dive into this incredible story of fate, fortune, and finding meaning where you least expect it. James Harrington's boots crunched over brittle corn stalks as he made his way across the southeastern field of Harrington Farm. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the drought-stricken land that had been in his family for 5 generations. At 42, the lines etched into his weathered face told the story of a man who had spent his life battling the elements, the economy, and lately, the bank that was ready to foreclose on everything he had ever known. He paused at the edge of his property, where the fields gave way to dense forest. The fence needed mending again, another expense he couldn't afford. 3 consecutive years of drought had devastated his crops. Last year's harvest had barely covered the interest on his loans. The final notice from the bank had arrived yesterday, getting him 30 days before they would take his land. James ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, squinting at the horizon. The forecast had promised rain, but the cloudless blue sky mocked such hopes. His dog, Scout, an aging border collie, trotted up beside him, pressing against his leg as if sensing his despair. "Not much left to do, old boy," James murmured, patting the dog's head. "Maybe it's time to accept that some battles can't be won." Scout's ears suddenly perked up. The dog turned toward the forest, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "What is it?" James asked, following the dog's gaze. At first, he saw nothing unusual among the trees and underbrush. Then, a flash of color caught his eye, something bright moving awkwardly through the forest. James squinted, thinking it might be a deer, but as the figure emerged from the tree line, he realized it was a person, a woman stumbling toward his property. Her clothing, what appeared to be expensive hiking gear, was torn and dirty. Her dark hair was tangled with leaves and twigs. Even from a distance, James could see she was favoring her right leg, limping heavily as she navigated the uneven terrain. As she cleared the trees and stepped onto his land, she looked up. For just a moment, their eyes met across the field, hers wide with what looked like fear or desperation. Then, without warning, she collapsed to the ground. "Hey!" James called out, already running toward her. Scout bounded ahead, reaching the fallen woman first. By the time James caught up, the dog was circling her anxiously, whining. The woman lay face down in the dirt. James knelt beside her, gently rolling her onto her back. She was young, maybe in her early 30s, with delicate features that seemed incongruous with her current state. A nasty gash ran along her forehead, crusted with dried blood. Her breathing was shallow but steady. "Miss, can you hear me?" James tapped her cheek lightly, receiving no response. He checked her for other injuries, finding her ankle swollen to nearly twice its normal size. What was someone like her doing out here, miles from the nearest hiking trail? The nearest town was Preston, over 15 miles away, and it wasn't exactly a tourist destination. James hesitated only briefly before scooping her up in his arms. She weighed almost nothing against his farm-hardened muscles. Scout followed anxiously as James carried the unconscious woman back across his failing fields toward the 2-story farmhouse that had been his family's home for generations. As he walked, he couldn't help noticing the quality of her clothing. Even torn and dirty, he could tell it was expensive. The watch on her wrist looked like it cost more than his truck. Whoever this woman was, she didn't belong in this remote corner of rural America. The farmhouse stood as it had for over a century, white paint peeling, wraparound porch sagging slightly on one side. It had once been the proud centerpiece of a thriving farm. Now it was just another asset on the bank's foreclosure list. James shouldered open the screen door, careful not to bang the woman's head against the frame. He laid her gently on the sofa in the living room, a comfortable, if worn piece of furniture that had belonged to his parents. The woman remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. James fetched the first aid kit from the kitchen, along with a bowl of cool water and a clean cloth. As he cleaned the dirt and blood from her face, he couldn't help but wonder who she was and what circumstances had brought her, clearly injured and alone, to the edge of his property. There was something about her face that seemed vaguely familiar, though he couldn't place it. "What kind of trouble are you in?" he murmured, though he expected no answer. Scout settled on the floor beside the sofa, his eyes fixed on the stranger as if appointed her guardian. James finished cleaning the wound on her forehead. It wasn't as bad as it had first appeared, and applied an antiseptic ointment before covering it with a bandage. He elevated her injured ankle on a pillow and wrapped it in an ice pack. With nothing more to be done until she regained consciousness, James went to the kitchen to put on a pot of coffee. The morning newspaper lay open on the table to the financial section, a small headline catching his eye. Blackwood Technology stock soars amid merger rumors. Below it was a photo of an older man with silver hair and piercing eyes, identified as Richard Blackwood, founder and CEO. James had little interest in the fortunes of tech billionaires. His own financial problems were pressing enough. He folded the paper and tossed it aside, pouring himself a cup of coffee before returning to check on his unexpected guest. To his surprise, she was awake, attempting to sit up while Scout watched attentively. "Whoa, take it easy," James said, setting his coffee down on the side table and moving to help her. "You've got a nasty bump on your head, and your ankle's pretty swollen." The woman flinched at his approach, pressing herself back against the sofa cushions, eyes wide with alarm. "It's okay," he said, raising his hands placatingly. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name's James Harrington. This is my farm. I found you collapsed at the edge of my property." She looked around the room, taking in her surroundings with quick, assessing glances. Her eyes, James noticed, were a striking shade of green, intelligent and wary. "Where am I?" she asked finally, her voice hoarse but cultured, with an accent that spoke of expensive education. "About 15 miles outside Preston," James replied. "Middle of nowhere, basically." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "How long have I been unconscious?" James glanced at his watch. "Not long, maybe 30 minutes since I found you." She nodded slowly, wincing as the movement aggravated her headache. I should go." "You're not going anywhere on that ankle," James said firmly. "And you might have a concussion. You need to rest." The woman hesitated, clearly torn between suspicion and the reality of her physical condition. Finally, she settled back against the cushions, one hand moving to the bandage on her forehead. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For helping me." James nodded, picking up his coffee again. "You want to tell me what you were doing out there? The nearest hiking trail is miles away." She dropped her gaze, fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket he draped over her. "I got lost," she said simply. Too simply. James raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. Everyone had secrets, and hers were none of his business. "I'm going to get you some water and something for that headache. Then maybe you can tell me who I should call to come get you." A flash of panic crossed her face. "No calls, please." James paused, studying her more carefully now. "You? In some kind of trouble?" "No, I need some time, please." Her eyes met his, pleading. Against his better judgment, James nodded. "All right, no calls for now. But you'll need to give me something to call you." She hesitated only briefly. "Alex. My name is Alex." "Well, Alex, you're welcome to rest here until you're feeling better. But I should warn you, this isn't exactly the Ritz." A small smile curved her lips. "That's exactly what I need right now." James returned to the kitchen, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. Alex was clearly running from something or someone, An experience had taught him that other people's problems had a way of becoming his own. But he couldn't very well throw an injured woman out, especially not with night approaching. When he returned with water and painkillers, he found Alex examining a framed photograph on the side table. It showed a younger James, with a smiling woman and a little girl around 7 years old. "My wife and daughter," James said, setting the glass and pills on the table. "That was taken about 10 years ago." Alex set the photo down carefully. "Where are they now?" A familiar ache settled in James's chest. "Caroline, my wife, passed away 8 years ago. Cancer." He took a breath. "Lily, my daughter, lives with my sister in Chicago. She's finishing high school there. Better opportunities than I could give her here." "I'm sorry about your wife," Alex said quietly. "And your daughter? You must miss her." "Every day," James admitted. "But I call her twice a week, and she visits during summers. My sister can provide the kind of life I can't right now." Alex took the pills with a sip of water, studying him thoughtfully. "This farm? It's been in your family a long time?" "5 generations," James said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "My great-great-grandfather built this house in 1903. We've weathered all kinds of storms over the years, but—" He trailed off, not wanting to burden a stranger with his financial troubles. "But?" Alex prompted. James shrugged. "Times are tough. Farming's not what it used to be." Before Alex could respond, Scout suddenly raised his head, ears alert. A moment later, James heard the sound of tires on gravel. "Expecting someone?" Alex asked, tension evident in her voice. "No," James replied, moving to the window. A black SUV with tinted windows had pulled up in front of the house. "You want to tell me who might be looking for you?" Alex's face had gone pale. "Please," she whispered. I can't go back yet, please." James Harrington had made a career of minding his own business, but something in her plea reached him. Without quite knowing why, he made a decision. "Stay here," he said quietly. "And stay down." As James stepped onto the porch, the SUV's doors opened, and 2 men in dark suits emerged. Everything about them screamed security. The earpieces, the sunglasses, the way they scanned the surroundings. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" James called, keeping his tone casual as he descended the porch steps. Scout remained at his side, hackles slightly raised. The taller of the 2 men stepped forward. "Good afternoon, sir. We're looking for a missing person, a woman who may have passed through this area. She's about 5'6", dark hair, wearing hiking clothes. She's been missing since this morning, and her family is very concerned." James maintained a neutral expression. "Haven't seen anyone fitting that description. Don't get many hikers out this way." The man held up a phone displaying a photo. "This is her. Take a good look. It's very important that we find her." James studied the picture. It was undeniably Alex, though in the photo she looked polished and composed, dressed in what appeared to be designer clothes, her hair perfectly styled. The woman in his living room was a far cry from this glossy image, but it was clearly the same person. "Sorry," James said, handing the phone back. "Haven't seen her. Like I said, don't get many strangers out here. Mostly just me and my dog." The 2 men exchanged glances. "Would you mind if we took a look around? Her last known GPS location was near this area." "Actually, I do mind," James said firmly. "This is private property. If you want to search it, you'll need a warrant." The second man stepped forward, his posture subtly threatening. "Sir, this is a matter of considerable urgency. The woman we're looking for is Alexandra Blackwood. Perhaps you've heard of her father, Richard Blackwood." The name did ring a bell. The man from the newspaper. James maintained his composure. "Don't much follow business news out here, and that doesn't change the fact that this is private property." The first man produced a business card. "If you do see her, please call immediately. Ms. Blackwood is in a fragile state. Her family is extremely worried." James took the card, noting the Blackwood Technologies logo. "I'll keep an eye out." The men seemed reluctant to leave, but eventually returned to their vehicle. James watched as they drove slowly away, waiting until they were out of sight before returning to the house. Inside, he found Alex, or Alexander Blackwood, apparently sitting tensely on the edge of the sofa, ready to flee despite her injuries. "They're gone," James said, holding up the business card. "But I think you owe me an explanation, Ms. Blackwood." Alex slumped back, her face a mixture of relief and resignation. "How much do you know about me?" "Nothing beyond what those men told me. Your father is Richard Blackwood. I gather that's significant." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Yes, quite significant. Blackwood Technologies? The conglomerate that makes everything from smartphones to military drones? My father built it from nothing. Now it's one of the largest tech companies in the world, and he's one of the richest men in the country." End quote. James sat down in the armchair across from her. "And you're running from that?" "Most people run toward money, not away from it." Alex's fingers traced the edge of her bandage. "I'm running from a cage, gilded as it may be." She met his eyes directly. 2 days from now, I'm supposed to marry Charles Westfield, heir to Westfield Industries. Our union, as my father calls it, would create the largest corporate merger in history. Billions of dollars in combined assets, and market share. "And you don't love him?" James guessed. "I barely know him," Alex replied. "We've met exactly 4 times, always surrounded by lawyers and PR teams. This isn't a marriage, it's a business transaction, and I'm just another asset to be leveraged." She shifted, wincing as she accidentally jostled her injured ankle. "So you ran," James said. Alex nodded. 2 days ago, I disabled the tracking on my phone and car, took cash from an account my father doesn't monitor, and just disappeared. I've been hiking through the backcountry, trying to make it hard for them to track me, but I fell down a ravine last night. She gestured to her ankle. Spent the night outdoors, then tried to keep moving this morning until I couldn't anymore. James processed this information slowly. It sounded like something from a movie, not the kind of problem that typically found its way to Harrington Farm. "Those men will be back," he said finally. "I know. I should go. You can barely walk." They sat in silence for a moment, the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner, the only sound. "Look," James said finally, "what you do with your life is your business. I don't know you, and I certainly don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. But you're injured, and night's coming. Stay until morning at least. We can figure out next steps then." Relief washed over Alex's face. "Thank you. I know this puts you in an awkward position." James stood, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "One more problem on top of everything else won't make much difference." As the afternoon waned into evening, James heated up a simple dinner of homemade vegetable soup and cornbread, nothing fancy, but filling. To his surprise, Alex ate enthusiastically, claiming it was the best meal she'd had in days. Given that she'd been hiding in the woods, that might well have been true. Their conversation over dinner was cautious at first, both of them feeling out the boundaries of this strange situation. But as the evening progressed, James found himself opening up about the farm, his struggles with the bank, the drought that had devastated his crops. It had been a long time since he'd had anyone to talk to besides Scout, and there was something oddly freeing about confiding in someone who would soon be gone from his life. In turn, Alex shared glimpses of her own strange existence growing up, as the heir to a vast fortune, the crushing expectations, the lack of privacy, the constant awareness that every relationship might be motivated by greed or ambition rather than genuine connection. "Don't get me wrong," she said, sipping the herbal tea James had made. "I've had every privilege imaginable. The best schools, travel, financial security. I know how fortunate I am in many ways. But money doesn't buy happiness," James offered, the platitude falling awkwardly from his lips. Alex smiled sadly. "It's more complicated than that. Money buys safety, options, comfort, all things that can contribute to happiness. What it doesn't buy is authenticity or freedom, at least not in my world. Everything is strategic, calculated. Even childhood friendships were vetted by my father's security team." "Sounds lonely," James observed. "It was. Alex set down her mug. "That's part of why I ran. I realized I was about to enter an even more restrictive cage. The merged companies would be worth billions, and I would effectively become a corporate asset, wheeled out for events and photo ops, expected to produce heirs and uphold the family image. James found himself unexpectedly moved by her plight. Different as their lives were, he recognized the look of someone trapped by circumstances. "So what's your plan?" he asked. "You can't run forever." Alex stared into her tea. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just needed space to think, to assert some control. Maybe I'll go back on my own terms, negotiate some kind of independence. Maybe I'll disappear entirely. I have money my father can't touch. Not billions, but enough to start a new life. And your ankle won't even let you get to the main road right now," James pointed out. Alex laughed softly. "True. I'm not exactly in fighting shape at the moment." As night fell, James made up the guest bedroom unused since his sister's last visit months ago. Alex thanked him with a sincerity that suggested she wasn't accustomed to simple kindnesses offered without agenda. James lay awake, long into the night, thinking about the strange turn his day had taken. Tomorrow, he would need to check the irrigation system on the north field, call the bank to beg for another extension, and somehow help a billionaire's daughter escape her gilded cage. The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. Outside his window, clouds finally gathered on the horizon. The promise of rain carried on the changing wind. Alex woke to unfamiliar surroundings, momentary panic gripping her until memory returned. The simple guest room of the farmhouse was bathed in early morning light. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window. Not the violent storm that had been forecast, but a steady, soothing shower. Her ankle throbbed dully as she sat up, but the swelling had subsided somewhat. The events of the previous day felt dreamlike. Yet here she was, hiding out on a struggling farm with a man who owed her nothing but had sheltered her anyway. The smell of coffee and something baking drew her downstairs, moving carefully to avoid putting weight on her injured ankle. She made her way to the kitchen where she found James at the stove, flipping pancakes. "Morning," he said, glancing up. "How's the ankle?" "Better," Alex replied, easing herself into a chair at the kitchen table. Scout trotted over to greet her, and she scratched behind his ears. "The rain came." James nodded, a hint of relief in his expression. "Not enough to break the drought, but it's something. Might save what's left of the soybean crop, at least." "Is that important?" "Every bit helps." He set a plate of pancakes in front of her. "I've got real maple syrup, one luxury I never skimp on." Alex smiled at the simple pleasure he took in this small indulgence. "It smells amazing." As they ate, James outlined his plan for the day. "I need to check the irrigation system, make sure it's distributing the rainwater properly. After that, I have to go into town for a few supplies. You'll be safe here, those security men won't be back until they've checked other areas." Alex hesitated. "I don't want to impose any more than I already have." "You're not imposing," James said simply. "Just rest that ankle. There are books on the shelf in the living room if you get bored. No internet out here. I'm afraid can't afford it anymore." The lack of internet, which would have been unthinkable in Alex's normal life, now felt like a blessing. No way to be tracked electronically, no constant barrage of news and information. "Thank you," she said. For everything." James shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "It's nothing." But they both knew it wasn't nothing. In sheltering her, he had potentially placed himself in the crosshairs of a powerful man accustomed to getting his way. Whatever James's own problems, he'd taken on hers without hesitation. After breakfast, James headed out to check his fields, leaving Alex alone in the farmhouse with Scout for company. Her professional instincts urged her to use this time productively, to strategize, plan her next move, consider all contingencies, but instead, she found herself drawn to the family photos that lined the hallway. James as a young boy with his parents in front of this same house. James and his wife on their wedding day. James holding baby Lily. Family Christmas. Celebrations, birthday parties, ordinary moments preserved in time. A normal life, the kind she had never known. In the home office, she found more recent photos of Lily, now a teenager with her father's eyes and her mother's smile. Beside them lay stacks of bills, many stamped with final notices. The calendar on the wall had the date circled in red, 30 days from now, with bank deadline written in block letters. Alex sank into the desk chair, struck by the contrast between her financial reality and James's. The amount needed to save this farm would be pocket change to her father, less than he spent on a weekend's entertainment. Yet for James, it represented everything. His heritage, his home, his connection to his late wife, his future. She was still contemplating this when the sound of tires on gravel alerted her to a vehicle approaching, peering cautiously through the curtains. She saw not the black SUV from yesterday, but an older sedan pulling up in front of the house. A woman in her 60s emerged, carrying what appeared to be a casserole dish, before Alex could decide whether to hide. The woman had reached the porch and was knocking on the door. Scout barked once in greeting rather than alarm, suggesting this was a regular visitor. Taking a deep breath, Alex smoothed her borrowed clothes, a flannel shirt and jeans from James that were too large but clean, and hobbled to the door. "Hello," she said, opening it just enough to be polite. The woman's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Ow!" "I was expecting James. He's out checking the irrigation," Alex explained. "I'm staying here for a few days." The woman's expression turned speculative. "I see. I'm Martha Jensen, James's neighbor from about 2 miles down the road." "And you are?" "And Alex?" "Alex," she replied simply, offering no last name. Martha nodded, clearly curious but too polite to pry directly. "Well, Alex, I've brought over a chicken casserole. James helps me with odd jobs around my place sometimes, and I like to return the favor with food. That man would live on coffee and sandwiches if left to his own devices." Alex accepted the dish, touched by this simple exchange of kindness. "That's very thoughtful. I'm sure he'll appreciate it." "You're limping," Martha observed. "Are you all right?" "Twisted my ankle hiking," Alex said, sticking close to the truth. "James was kind enough to help me out." Martha's expression softened. "That sounds like him. Always helping others, even when he's drowning in his own troubles." She hesitated. "Has he told you about the farm?" Alex nodded. "Some of it. The drought, the bank. It's breaking his heart," Martha said quietly. "This land isn't just property to him, it's his identity, his connection to everything he's loved and lost. His wife Caroline is buried under the oak tree behind the house." "Did he tell you that?" "No," Alex whispered, the revelation hitting her unexpectedly hard. "He visits her grave every Sunday, rain or shine, talks to her, tells her about Lily's latest achievements." Martha sighed. "He's a good man who's had more than his share of hardship. I keep praying for a miracle for him." The weight of Martha's words stayed with Alex long after the woman had departed. She returned to the kitchen to refrigerate the casserole, her mind churning with thoughts of James, the farm, and the stark differences between their worlds. By the time James returned, damp from the rain but satisfied with the irrigation system's performance, Alex had made a decision. She just wasn't entirely sure how to broach it. "Everything okay?" James asked, noting her pensive expression as he hung his wet jacket by the door. "Martha's car was leaving as I was coming back through the fields." "Did she stop by?" Alex nodded. "She brought a casserole. She seems nice." "Salt of the earth," James agreed. "Been a neighbor my whole life. Her husband passed a few years before Caroline. We look out for each other." The easy acceptance of interdependence, of community, struck Alex forcefully. In her world, relationships were strategic, alliances rather than friendships. "James," she began carefully, "I've been thinking about your situation with the bank." His expression closed slightly. "That's not your concern." "Maybe not," she acknowledged, "but I want to help." James shook his head. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Alex insisted. "It's an investment." That caught his attention. "What kind of investment?" Alex took a deep breath. "What if I bought into the farm, became a silent partner? You'd maintain operational control, but I'd provide the capital to pay off the bank and make some improvements. In return, I'd get a percentage of future profits." James stared at her. Why would you do that? This place has been losing money for years. Because I think it has potential, Alex said truthfully. With the right investments in irrigation, equipment, maybe some diversification. She paused, seeing the skepticism in his eyes. And because I need somewhere to disappear for a while. Somewhere my father would never think to look. Understanding dawned on James's face. You want to hide here. Not forever, Alex clarified. Just long enough to figure out my next steps, to negotiate from a position of strength rather than desperation. A few months maybe. James ran a hand through his hair, visibly torn. That's a lot of money to risk on a failing farm and a stranger. I've made riskier investments, Alex said with a small smile. And you're not exactly a stranger anymore. Before James could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching multiple this time caught their attention. They moved to the window together, watching as 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of the house. They're back, Alex whispered, fear evident in her voice. And they've brought reinforcements. James's jaw tightened. Stay here. No, Alex caught his arm. I can't let you face them alone. This is my problem. Then we face it together, James said firmly. But let me do the talking at first. They watched as 6 men in suits emerged from the vehicles, spreading out to form a perimeter around the house. From the last SUV, an older man stepped out, tall, imperious, with silver hair and penetrating eyes that missed nothing. Alex's grip on James's arm tightened. My father, she whispered. Richard Blackwood surveyed the farmhouse with obvious disdain before striding toward the front porch, 2 security men flanking him. James opened the door before they could knock, standing tall in the doorway with Alex slightly behind him, her hand resting on Scout's head for reassurance. Mr. Harrington, Richard Blackwood said, his voice cultured and cold. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't believe people can belong to anyone, Mr. Blackwood, James replied evenly. Richard's eyes narrowed. You lied to my security team yesterday. I protected someone who asked for my help. Alexandra, Richard said, finally acknowledging his daughter. This childish game ends now. The Westfield merger depends on your cooperation. Billions of dollars and thousands of jobs are at stake. Alex stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with James. Hello, Father. Always leading with the business implications, never with concern for your daughter's happiness. Happiness? Richard scoffed. I've given you every advantage, every luxury. What more could you possibly want? Freedom, Alex replied simply. The right to choose my own path, my own partner. Richard's expression hardened. Freedom is an illusion, Alexandra. We all have responsibilities, obligations. The merger with Westfield Industries will secure the company's future for generations to come. And what about my future? Alex challenged. Am I just another asset to be leveraged? You are a Blackwood, Richard replied, as if that answered everything. His gaze shifted to James. Mr. Harrington, I'm willing to overlook your interference in family matters. I understand from my sources that you're facing financial difficulties. Perhaps we could come to an arrangement beneficial to both of us. James's back stiffened. I'm not for sale, Mr. Blackwood. Everyone has a price, Richard said dismissively. Your farm is about to be foreclosed upon. I could make that problem disappear with a phone call. For a moment, James seemed to waver, the weight of his financial burden evident in his expression. Alex held her breath, understanding completely if he chose to accept the offer. After all, he'd known her less than 2 days. Why should he risk everything for her? But then James straightened, meeting Richard Blackwood's gaze directly. With respect, sir, there are some things money can't buy. Your daughter came to me injured and afraid, asking for help. Where I come from, we don't turn our backs on people in need, no matter who's asking. Pride in something deeper surged through Alex at his words. In that moment, standing in his worn flannel shirt on the porch of his failing farm, James Harrington possessed a dignity her father with all his billions could never match. Richard's face flushed with anger. Security, he snapped. Escort my daughter to the car. 2 men moved forward, but Scout growled, hackles raised, and James stepped protectively in front of Alex. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go," he said quietly. "Not from my property." "This is absurd," Richard hissed. "Alexandra, you have responsibilities. The announcement dinner is tomorrow night. The wedding is in less than a week. Do you have any idea of the consequences if you don't return?" "I'm well aware," Alex replied steadily, "and unwilling to discuss the future of Blackwood Technologies, but on my terms, not yours. I won't be forced into a marriage to serve corporate interests." Richard studied his daughter, perhaps truly seeing her for the first time in years. The stubborn set of her jaw, so like his own, told him this was not a battle he would win by force. "You always were headstrong," he said finally. "Like your mother." The mention of her mother, dead 15 years now, caught Alex by surprise. Richard Blackwood rarely spoke of his late wife. "Give me 3 days," Alex said. 3 days of peace to think clearly, to formulate a counter-proposal. Then I'll return to the city, and we can discuss the future of the company, like the business partners we are." "Business partners? Business partners?" Richard repeated, eyebrows rising. "I own 25% of Blackwood Technologies," Alex reminded him. "It's time I started acting like it." A tense silence fell. James remained steady beside Alex, his presence grounding her as she faced down the man who had controlled every aspect of her life for as long as she could remember. Finally, Richard gave a curt nod. 3 days. Then you return, and we discuss this rationally." He reached into his jacket and produced a mobile phone. "Take this. It's secure. I expect daily check-ins to confirm your safety." Alex accepted the phone, recognizing both the concession and the leash it represented. "Agreed." Richard turned his attention back to James. "Mr. Harrington, my daughter seems to have placed her trust in you. I hope that trust is not misplaced." "It isn't," James replied simply. With a final measuring look, Richard Blackwood returned to his vehicle. The security detail followed, though James noticed one man remaining behind, taking up a discreet position in a car parked just within sight of the farm's entrance. "Keeping an eye on me," Alex murmured, following James's gaze. Insurance against another escape attempt. As the convoy of black SUVs disappeared down the rural road, James and Alex retreated into the house, the tension of the confrontation leaving them both drained. "Thank you," Alex said quietly, "for standing up to him. Not many people do." James shrugged. "He may be a powerful man in his world, but this is my land. For now, at least." "About that," Alex said, settling onto the sofa with her injured ankle propped up. "My offer still stands. Investment, not charity," she added quickly, seeing his expression. James sat across from her, his weathered hands clasped between his knees. "Why would you want to invest in a failing farm? Be honest." Alex considered her words carefully. "Partly for the reasons I already gave you. I need a place to regroup, somewhere unexpected. But also because—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Because in less than 24 hours, you've shown me more genuine kindness than I've experienced in years. You had nothing to gain and potentially much to lose by helping me, but you did it anyway." "That's not a sound business decision," James pointed out. "Maybe I'm tired of sound business decisions," Alex replied. "Maybe I want to do something meaningful, instead of just profitable." James was silent for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window where rain continued to fall gently on his parched fields. "I won't take your money as a gift, or out of gratitude," he said finally. "But a legitimate investment, with proper paperwork, expected returns, everything transparent and businesslike, I could consider that." Relief washed over Alex's face. "That's exactly what I want. A real partnership." For the first time since she'd met him, James smiled fully, a transformation that lightened his entire being. "Then I think we have some planning to do. But first, I believe Martha left us a casserole." Over dinner, they began to outline what a partnership might look like. James explained the farm's challenges in detail: the outdated irrigation system, the need for more drought-resistant crop varieties, the equipment repairs that had been deferred too long. Alex listened attentively, occasionally making notes on a pad of paper James had provided. "What about diversification?" she suggested. Is the land suitable for anything besides traditional crops? James considered this. The western section has always been less productive for corn and soybeans. My grandfather used to talk about orchards. They're apples mostly. Said the soil composition was perfect for it, but the initial investment was too high when times were already tough during the Depression. Specialty crops could bring higher margins, Alex mused. Organic certification takes time, but adds considerable value. And direct-to-consumer sales through farmers markets or a CSA program could eliminate middlemen. James looked at her with newfound respect. You know agriculture? Alex laughed softly. I know business. The principles are the same across industries. Identify market needs, optimize production, control distribution channels. Besides, I wrote my MBA thesis on sustainable agriculture as an investment opportunity. It was my small rebellion against my father's tech-focused worldview. As the evening progressed, their discussion grew more animated. James found himself energized by Alex's fresh perspective and strategic thinking, while she was impressed by his deep practical knowledge and connection to the land. What had begun as a bizarre encounter between strangers was rapidly evolving into a partnership with genuine potential. When they finally retired for the night, James lay awake thinking not of his looming bankruptcy, but of apple orchards, irrigation systems, and new possibilities. For the first time in years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. Morning broke clear and bright, the rain having moved on during the night. Alex woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of James on the phone in the kitchen. His tone was different from the previous day, confident, almost cheerful as he spoke to someone about scheduling a meeting with his loan officer. When she made her way downstairs, he was finishing the call. Progress? She asked, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. The bank is willing to discuss refinancing options, James replied. Apparently having a potential investor changes their perspective on my creditworthiness. Alex smiled. Amazing how that works. They spent the morning drafting a formal partnership agreement. Alex insisted on fair terms. She would provide capital to clear the debt and fund improvements, but James would retain majority ownership and complete operational control. Her return would be a percentage of profits after the farm was stabilized, with provisions for buying back her share over time if he chose to. This isn't how venture capital usually works, James observed wryly. Investors typically want control. I'm not a typical investor, Alex replied. And this isn't just about money for me. It's about creating something meaningful, sustainable. By afternoon, her ankle had improved enough that she could walk with just a slight limp. James offered to show her around the property properly, and she eagerly accepted. The farmhouse sat on a gentle rise, with fields spreading out in all directions. To the east lay the corn and soybean crops, struggling but showing signs of revival after the rain. To the west, the land sloped toward a small creek, the area James had mentioned as potential orchard space. The water access makes it ideal, James explained, as they walked carefully along the creek bank. And the hillside provides natural drainage. Alex could see it in her mind's eye. Neat rows of apple and pear trees, perhaps a small farm store where visitors could purchase fresh produce and homemade goods. It's beautiful, she said truthfully. There's so much potential here. They continued their tour, James pointing out boundaries, explaining soil conditions, showing her the barn that needed a new roof and the vintage tractor he'd been nursing along for years. That's Caroline's garden, he said softly as they passed a fenced area near the house where wildflowers grew in cheerful profusion. She loved native plants, said they belonged here just like we did. Alex noted how he still spoke of his late wife in the present tense sometimes. She sounds wonderful. She was, James agreed. Strong, practical, but with this incredible capacity for joy. She could find wonder in the smallest things. A perfect tomato from the garden, the first fireflies of summer, Lily learning to read. His voice caught slightly. She would have found a way to save this place. Tell me about Lily, Alex prompted gently as they continued walking. James's expression brightened. She's brilliant. 16 now, top of her class. Wants to study environmental science in college, says she's going to come back and make this the most sustainable farm in the state. She's got her mother's brains, and 10 times my stubbornness. Sounds like a force to be reckoned with. She is, James agreed proudly. He hesitated before adding, she's why I couldn't give up, even when it seemed hopeless. This land is her birthright. They had reached a massive oak tree standing alone at the edge of the southeastern field. Beneath it, a simple headstone marked Caroline's resting place. I come here when I need to think, James said quietly. When the problem seemed too big, or I'm not sure which path to take. Alex hung back, giving him a moment of privacy with his memories. The simple dignity of this place, this final connection to the woman he had loved, moved her deeply. In her world, even death was a production, with elaborate mausoleums and performative grief. As they walked back toward the house, Alex noticed the security man still watching from his car in the distance. The reminder of her other life, waiting to reclaim her, sent a chill through her despite the warm afternoon. Are you okay? James asked, noticing her change in mood. Just thinking about what comes next, Alex admitted. In 3 days, I have to return and face my father, Charles Westfield, the board of directors, the media. I ran away because I felt trapped, but I haven't actually solved anything. James considered this as they reached the porch steps. Maybe running wasn't about solving the problem. Maybe it was about giving yourself space to see it clearly. And have I? Alex wondered aloud. Seen it clearly? Only you can answer that, James replied. But from where I stand, you seem to be someone who knows her own mind. You just needed to remember that. That evening, after dinner, Alex used the secure phone her father had provided to make a series of calls to her personal attorney, to a trusted friend on the board of directors, to a financial advisor who had been her mother's confidant before her death. Each conversation was brief but purposeful, pieces of a strategy taking shape in her mind. James gave her privacy for these calls, busying himself with farm accounts at the kitchen table. When she finally joined him, her expression was determined. I think I know what I need to do, she said. About the merger? Alex nodded. I can't stop it entirely. The business case is too strong, and my father holds the majority of voting shares. But I can negotiate conditions, protections for employees, commitments to ethical practices. And the marriage? James asked quietly. That's where I draw the line, Alex said firmly. The business merger can proceed without a personal one. Charles doesn't want this any more than I do. He's just better at hiding it, at playing the dutiful son. James looked skeptical. Your father seemed pretty set on the whole package. He is, Alex acknowledged, but he's also pragmatic. If I make it clear that fighting me on this will be costly and public, he'll compromise. You sound confident. I am, Alex realized, somewhat surprised by her own certainty. 2 days ago, I was running away. Now, I'm planning to run toward the problem, but on my own terms. James smiled faintly. Reminded me of something Caroline used to say: you can't outrun trouble, but you can face it on ground you've chosen. Wise woman, Alex said. The wisest. The wisest. James agreed. He hesitated before adding, what about this place? Was all that talk of partnership just a way to thank me for helping you? Absolutely not, Alex said firmly. If anything, I'm more convinced now that it's the right move for both of us. This farm represents everything I want my portion of the family wealth to support: sustainable practices, local economies, real connections to the land and community. James studied her for a long moment. You've changed since you stumbled onto my property. I've remembered who I am, Alex corrected gently. Who I wanted to be before I got lost in my father's expectations. The next morning, they finalized their partnership agreement. Alex arranged for her attorney to draw up formal documents, and James scheduled a meeting with his bank for the following week. The pieces were falling into place with surprising speed and ease. After lunch, they sat on the porch swing, enjoying the warmer weather and watching Scout chase butterflies in Caroline's wildflower garden. What will you do first? Alex asked. Once the bank is off your back? James had clearly given this considerable thought. Fix the irrigation system, repair the barn roof, then start preparing the western section for those apple trees we talked about. Nothing fancy at first, just laying the groundwork. And Lily? Will you tell her she can come home? A shadow crossed James's face. Not yet. My sister's place is still better for her right now. Better school, more opportunities. But maybe by next summer, things will be different enough that she could at least have the option. Alex understood his caution, his unwillingness to get his daughter's hopes up until he was certain. It spoke to his character, this careful stewardship of both land and relationships. I'd like to meet her sometime, Alex said. She sounds remarkable. She is, James agreed. And I think she'd like you too. The simple statement carried unexpected weight. It suggested continuity, a relationship that would extend beyond these 3 strange days of sanctuary. The afternoon passed in comfortable companionship as they refined their business plan. Jane showed Alex the farm's historical records, pointing out patterns of success and failure over generations. She was struck by the detailed documentation, the connection to history that informed every decision. 6 generations counting Lily, James said proudly. Not many businesses can claim that kind of legacy. It's what gives you strength, Alex observed, knowing you're part of something larger than yourself. As evening approached, Alex's phone rang. Richard Blackwood checking in as arranged. The conversation was brief and businesslike, with Alex confirming she would return to the city the following day as agreed. When she hung up, her expression was resolute. One more night of peace, she said, then back to reality. Will it be difficult? James asked, facing them all. Yes, Alex admitted, but necessary. Running solved nothing. It's time to stand my ground. Later that night, as a full moon rose over the farm, they sat by a small fire James had built in the fire pit on the back patio. The night was cool but clear. Stars scattered across the vast rural sky in a display, impossible to see in the city. I've been thinking, James said suddenly, about what you said earlier about being part of something larger than yourself. Alex looked at him questioningly. That's what's been missing in your life, he continued. Despite all the wealth and privilege, you haven't had that sense of connection, of purpose beyond the next business deal or social obligation. The insight struck Alex deeply. You're right, she said softly. Everything has always been about individual achievement, accumulation, status. Never about contribution to something enduring. Maybe that's what this partnership can be for you, James suggested. Not just a hiding place or an investment, but a connection to something real. The firelight cast warm shadows across his face, highlighting the sincerity in his eyes. In that moment, Alex felt an unexpected surge of emotion. Not romantic exactly, but a profound appreciation for this man who saw her so clearly after knowing her so briefly. I'd like that, she said simply. Morning came all too quickly. Alex packed her few belongings, the hiking clothes now cleaned and mended by James's careful hands. Her ankle was much improved, though still tender. The cut on her forehead had faded to a faint line that would likely disappear completely within weeks. James loaded her pack into his truck. They had agreed he would drive her to the town of Preston, where her father's driver would meet them to take her back to the city. It was a compromise, not quite surrendering directly to her father's security team, but not running away either. Are you sure about all this? James asked as they prepared to leave. The partnership, I mean. Once you're back in your world, this might all seem different. Alex understood his concern. This isn't a whim, James. I've been looking for meaning, for a way to use my resources that aligns with my values. This farm, what we could build here, it matters. He nodded, seemingly reassured. As they drove toward town, Alex gazed out at the passing landscape, the gentle hills, the small farms, the open sky, so different from the urban canyon of steel and glass that awaited her. I'll come back in 2 weeks, she said. Once I've settled things with my father and the board. We can start implementing the first phase of improvements then. I'll be here, James replied simply. The drive was too short. Soon they were pulling into the agreed-upon meeting point, a small cafe in the center of Preston. A black town car was already waiting. the driver standing attentively beside it. James parked and turned to Alex. "Good luck," he said. "Remember, you're stronger than you think." "I won't forget what you did for me," Alex replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just the shelter or the bandages, but the reminder of who I want to be." Impulsively, she leaned over and kissed his cheek, a gesture of gratitude and something more complex that neither was quite ready to name. Then she was gone, walking steadily, despite her lingering limp, toward the waiting car, toward the confrontation that would determine her future. James watched until the car disappeared around a corner, then drove back to his farm, to the ball, tasks that awaited him, to the hope that had rekindled in his heart. 2 days later, James was repairing fence posts when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered anyway. "James?" "It's Alex." Her voice was tired, but triumphant. "It's done. The merger will proceed. But the marriage is off. My father wasn't happy, but he accepted my terms when I made it clear the alternatives would be worse." "Congratulations," James said, genuinely pleased for her. "Was it difficult?" "Very," Alex admitted. "But worth it. I'm calling because I've transferred the first installment of our investment funds to your account. The bank should be contacting you shortly to confirm." James leaned against the fence post, momentarily overwhelmed. "That was fast." "I don't waste time once I've made a decision," Alex replied. "The formal partnership documents will be delivered tomorrow for your signature, but I wanted you to know the money is already there. You can start on the irrigation system right away." "Thank you," James said simply, knowing the words were inadequate. "Don't thank me," Alex said. "This is business, remember? I expect results." Her tone was light, teasing, but with a core of seriousness that reassured him this was indeed a real investment, not charity. "When will you come to see those results?" James asked. There was a pause. 2 weeks, as we agreed. Things are chaotic here with the restructuring, but I've made it clear I'll be taking a step back from daily operations. My father isn't pleased, but he's adjusting to the new reality. "Good for you," James said. "I should go board meeting in 5 minutes." "But James, I meant what I said. I'm coming back. This partnership matters to me." After they hung up, James stood for a long time looking out over his land, the struggling fields that would soon be revitalized, the hillside that would become an orchard, the home that would remain in his family for another generation. The bank called an hour later, confirming the deposit and eager to discuss the loan payoff. By evening, James had ordered parts for the irrigation system and scheduled contractors to repair the barn roof. Things were moving with dizzying speed after years of stagnation. That night, he sat on the porch steps with Scout beside him, looking up at the stars. "We're going to be okay, old boy," he murmured, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Better than okay." 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The bank loan was paid off, the deed to the farm once again clear. Contractors came and went, repairing and upgrading. James worked from dawn till dusk, his energy renewed by purpose and possibility. When Alex's car pulled up the driveway exactly 14 days after she'd left, James was finishing the installation of the new irrigation controls. Scout was the first to notice her arrival, barking joyfully and racing toward the sleek vehicle. James straightened, wiping his hands on a rag as he watched Alex emerge from the car. She looked different, more polished in tailored pants and a simple blouse, her hair styled, the cuts and bruises from her escape attempt fully healed. Yet something essential remained the same, the directness of her gaze, the quiet determination in her bearing. "Welcome back," he called, walking to meet her. Alex smiled, kneeling to greet Scout before turning her attention to James. "It's good to be back," she said, and he could tell she meant it. As they walked the property together, James pointing out the improvements already underway, Alex felt a sense of rightness she'd rarely experienced. The corporate battles of the past 2 weeks, the negotiations, the power plays, the media scrutiny seemed distant and almost unreal compared to the solid ground beneath her feet and the clear purpose before her. "I've been thinking," she said as they reached the western hillside where the orchard would be planted come spring, "about making this a real base for me, not just an occasional visit to check on my investment." James looked at her questioningly. "There's a small cottage in town for sale. Alex continued. I could use it as an office and part-time residence, close enough to be involved here, far enough to give you your space. James considered this, surprised by how much he liked the idea. You'd spend that much time away from the city? The merger is moving forward without requiring my daily input, Alex explained. And I've realized something important in these past weeks. I don't want to just fund this project from afar. I want to be part of building it, with my hands as well as my capital. The sincerity in her voice touched something in James. He'd expected her return to be brief, a business check-in before she returned to her real life. The possibility that this farm, this partnership, might become a central part of her life rather than a side project was both surprising and deeply satisfying. The cottage sounds perfect, he said. And I could use the help, especially with the orchard planning. Over dinner that evening, Martha's casserole, which had become something of a joke between them, they discussed next steps for the farm, the potential for organic certification, the marketing plan for direct-to-consumer sales. The conversation flowed easily, a partnership of equals despite their vastly different backgrounds. I called Lily yesterday, James mentioned as they finished eating. Told her about the changes here, the partnership with you. What did she think? Alex asked. A smile spread across James's face. She's cautiously optimistic, wants to know if she can come home for Thanksgiving rather than Christmas this year. Says she wants to see the improvements for herself. That's wonderful, Alex said warmly. It would be lovely to meet her. She asked about you, actually. Seems she Googled you after our call. Alex winced. Oh dear. What did she find? Enough to be impressed, James said. And enough to be protective of her old dad. She warned me not to let you turn the farm into a corporate retreat for tech bros, her words. Alex laughed. I promise. No tech bros. Scout would never allow it. At the sound of his name, the dog thumped his tail against the floor contentedly. As evening settled over the farm, they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and purple. In the distance, the partially repaired barn stood outlined against the darkening sky, a symbol of renewal. When I ran away 2 weeks ago, Alex said softly, I had no plan beyond escape. I never imagined I'd end up here, like this. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, James agreed. Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes. He gestured to the land spreading out before them, beginning to heal under their combined care. Sometimes for the better, Alex finished. The future stretched before them, uncertain in its details, but rich with possibility. A struggling farm, finding new life. A woman of privilege, discovering purpose. Two unlikely partners, building something meaningful from the chance encounter that had brought them together. As darkness fell, the first stars appeared overhead, constant and bright, witnessing the beginning of a story neither could have predicted, but both were now committed to writing together, one season at a time.